Much like God is in your future. God has been to your future. He designed and created your future. And when the time is appropriate and right, He will usher you in. He will invite you into your future. So God was saying to Noah, come, I am already in the ark. I am going to be on this journey with you. I am not going to be outside, far away out there. I am going to be in the ark with you as you go through this storm, this next chapter of your life. Or if you're going through it now, God is saying, I am in there with you. Noah waited for the rain to stop. He waited for the dove to return. He waited for the waters to recede. And he's now waiting to hear the voice of God again. So Noah understood that waiting was critical to anything that God was about to do. God had to destroy the creation as it was in order to preserve and protect the possibility for future redemption. It's like amputating a part of your body, a limb, to save the rest. It was an emergency surgery and intervention that God had to take. Otherwise, humanity as a whole would have self-destructed. What's good, everybody? Scripture to Culture with Jay, a book-by-book journey through the Bible where we explore the unified story of scriptures and uncover rich scripture connections that reveal how that all roads in the Bible ultimately lead to the person of Jesus Christ. So it's been a while, and I will be doing a recap of Genesis chapter 7, chapter 8 and 9 in this 11th episode. So in chapter 7, the Bible opens up with the idea there that God is now beginning to invite Noah and his wife, entire family, and the animals into the boat or the ark. Now, there's a key word that I want us to pay attention to, and a lot of the traditional old translations, such as your KJV, your NKJV, your Amplified, your Young's Literal Translation, and a few other older ones, would use the word come. So God said to Noah, come into the ark or into the boat. Whereas a lot of our newer translations like NLT and a few others would use the word go into the boat. I want to go with the translation that says come. And the reason why is because I believe that God was already in the boat. And so God was saying to Noah that, hey, you've spent the best part of 120 years building this ark, but I have been central to it. I have been right at the center of it. It was designed around me, being God. I gave you the dimensions, the structure, the materials. I supplied everything to you. And so I am already in the boat, in the ark, and I'm asking you to come. Much like God is in your future. God has been to your future. He designed and created your future. And when the time is appropriate and right, He will usher you in. He will invite you into your future. So God was saying to Noah, come, I am already in the ark. I am going to be on this journey with you. I am not going to be outside, far away out there. I am going to be in the ark with you as you go through this storm, this next chapter of your life, or if you're going through it now, God is saying, I am in there with you. Just as He was with the Hebrew guys, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fire, He was the fourth man in there. He was the person in the lion's den with Daniel as well. So God was inviting Noah into the ark because he was there. He was going to be on the journey with them. And so that's an important thought that I would like us to take note of. God was saying, come. And in verse 9 of chapter 7, they entered. So they being Noah, his wife, his 3 sons, what are their names? Shem, Ham, Japheth, and their wives, 8 of them, and the clean and unclean animals, 2 pairs or a pair of unclean animals, and 7 of clean animals. So verse 9, we're told that they entered. They entered. That word is key because safety, security, deliverance from God's judgment was not to be earned. It was to be entered into. So safety was not earned, it was entered. Noah was not saved because he could swim. He was saved because he entered. And likewise, all the other animals and Noah's family, they simply entered. The idea of swimming is suggestive of effort, human effort. Guess what? Peter could have swum to meet Jesus. Jesus was walking, he was not swimming. He could swim, but he was walking. To show that what I'm doing is not human engineered or human enabled. It's divine. So safety was entered. It was not earned. And we move into verse 11. We see the 40 days, 40 nights. The number 40 in the Bible is very symbolic of completion, symbolic of purification, perfection. So we see Jesus in the wilderness for 40 days, 40 nights. Moses on the mountain, 40 days, 40 nights. Israel in the wilderness, 40 years. 400 years in Egypt. So the number 40, or 4 and as many zeros as possible is always symbolic, right? Now, I find this word again in verse 16 very instructive and revealing of what's going on here. Then the Lord closed the door behind them. Remember, God was in the ark. And now God is one closing the ark. What that tells me, and what that should tell us all as members of the body of Christ, as leaders, as preachers, teachers, evangelists, apostles, prophets, what that tells us is we are not to determine who comes in and who goes out. We are not to shut the door. It is not our place to shut the door on anybody. As a matter of fact, in Revelation chapter 3, verse 4 and 7, I think, Jesus is introduced as the one that holds the key that could shut and close at will. So he determines who to shut the door against and when to shut the door. It is not our place. Our place is just to simply share the gospel, be effective ministers and servants of reconciliation. We don't shut the door. We don't shut the door on who hears the gospel, who gets into the church, who participates. We don't shut the door. It's his responsibility. We do what he's asked us to do. We embody the gospel, and he shuts the door when he's ready. I somehow think that had the shutting of the door been left to Noah, he probably would not have done it. Because he had family, friends, work colleagues, acquaintances that he would not have wanted to see perish. And so God had to take responsibility for being the one to shut the door. So we move into chapter 8, and chapter 8 opens up with this very profound statement. And God remembered Noah. That's provoking in many ways. And I think it's a significant truth in that given God never forgets in the first place. What do we mean by God remembered Noah? God doesn't forget. He's engraven us in the palm of his hand. So how is he forgetting? God doesn't forget. Technically, there's a technical word for it, which is anthropomorphism. And what that really means is an attempt to use characteristic traits or things that are typical of human beings to explain a divine truth. So the word remembered here would be better rendered as God acting on his covenant commitment. So God began to act on his covenant commitment, as we see in chapter 8, beginning from verse 1, and the waters stopped, and the flood waters began to recede, and then the boats came to rest on the mountains of Ararat. It's important that the boat rested on a mountain at the peak. That's where the boat rested. And I think we would see partly the reasons why. Most times God would ask the likes of Abraham and the rest of them to go offer sacrifices on the mountain, right? I'll come to that shortly. But then in verse 9, as Noah begins to send out animals, he starts with the raven. Ravens are scavengers, right? They can handle corpses, and they can handle carcasses, human carcasses, and just feed on them. So the raven just goes out, and then he sends the dove, and the dove returns to sing, because doves don't feed on carcasses. Doves need fresh, vital, healthy vegetation, plants. So the dove could not find a resting place, whereas the ravens could. And so Noah would wait for 7 days. We see a lot of 7-day intervals there. He would wait for 7 days and then release the dove again. Now, all of this is pointing to one thing. Waiting is part of God's work. Waiting is. Because healing happens over time. Even truth is revealed gradually. And waiting is part of God's work. In our modern thinking and mindset, we value immediacy. Waiting is an obstruction. Waiting is denying me of accessing something that I should have. So waiting is considered problematic. But let's not forget actually that the ark or the boat was not headed somewhere. it was just a floating vehicle. And sometimes in life, it seems as though we are left out of control, at the behest, or at the, look for another word, at the mercy of circumstances beyond our control. Sometimes life happens that way, and we feel that nothing is happening. We're waiting for relief that never seems to arrive. And so we are waiting and we are wasting time. But if only you would understand that waiting is part of God's work. There are times where God will save us by waiting, by making us wait. So Noah understood, I believe, that there was a place to wait. Waiting was part of the plan. And so he would wait for a period of time, send out the dove, until the dove never returned. And God said to Noah, leave the boat. That's a lot of waiting. Noah waited for the rain to stop. He waited for the dove to return. He waited for the waters to recede. And he's now waiting to hear the voice of God again. So Noah understood that waiting was critical to anything that God was about to do. And so God tells him, leave the boat, all of you, you and your wife, etc. Release all the animals. So God simply gives them the freedom, in other words, the instruction to leave. After over a year of waiting in the boat, God releases them into a new destiny. And God, in fact, challenges them to be fruitful and multiply. That's interesting. But do you know what I find most surprising? Is that when Noah comes out, remember I said the boat stopped on Mount Ararat. When Noah comes out, the first thing Noah does is not to look around, study the terrain, go and gather information, see what remains. No, that's not the first thing he does. It doesn't, in fact, start to go around securing resources or reorganizing society. He doesn't do any of that, but he does one thing. He worships on the mount, because most times key covenant carriers like Abraham, Moses would go up to worship. So Noah worships on the mount. The first thing he does is to worship. And what that shows us is that Noah's heart and posture was to prioritize God above everything else. So worship to Noah was a relationship. Worship was not a transaction. It wasn't a form of payment. It wasn't a routine. It wasn't a ritual. It was a relationship that prioritized God above everything else. Noah would have had survivor's guilt, but he had to set that aside and prioritize worshiping God. Not so much, or not only because he was grateful, but I would imagine Noah saying, Lord, I don't understand all of this. I am angry, I'm upset, I am bitter right now because I've lost families, I've lost friends, I've lost so many things, and so many people have perished. I don't understand all of that. I don't know why it happened. I don't know why you decided to save me and my family and this bunch of animals, but I am submitting to your wisdom in worship. I don't fully understand it, but I'm submitting to your wisdom and expressing gratitude. Now, this is so important because a lot of people, a lot of individuals, and rightly so, they're justified to feel that way because we must validate, we must acknowledge and recognize emotions and feelings. Rightly so, people that have come out of traumas feel bitter. They feel forgotten. And so they step out of traumas and challenging circumstances with bitterness, with a feeling of being entitled and anger towards God. Now, those are valid emotions that we must recognize, acknowledge, and validate. But we shouldn't end it there. Noah had to set all that aside and said, I might be feeling bitter, I might be feeling horrible, but Lord, I am going to worship you because you are King. Regardless of what I've been through, regardless of the abuse, you remain God, and I will treat you as God. I survived it for a reason. I survived the abuse, the trauma for a reason. That's what Noah was in effect saying. I survived this traumatic situation, an event, for a reason. And I am going to worship you because I know that you're a God who is able to make all things work together for our good, the collective and the individual good. God has a way of using whatever fabric, thread, and tapestry of our life to design something beautiful. And that is so important. God makes all things work together for good. God uses all experiences, all life experiences can be used by God for His ultimate purpose and our good. So that was the psychology of worship that Noah adopted. He began with worship. He wasn't going to do the blame game. He was just going to worship God first and foremost. So that's what Noah does there towards the ending of chapter 8. And here's something interesting actually. Notice that after Noah offers the worship, God is now saying, I am not going to curse the ground anymore for man's sake, because I have seen that their imaginations are bent towards evil continually from their youth. Wait a minute. God has just spent over a year flooding the earth because of sin, and we're just being told here that this very sin God was upset about survives the flood. That's interesting. That goes to show us that when God said Noah was righteous, he was the only one that was righteous, and he found favor in the sight of God. God wasn't saying Noah was the best behaved or he was a perfect person. No. Noah was righteous. Noah was in relationship with God. Noah found grace in the sight of God. So Noah was chosen. And that's why he was righteous. He was in relationship with God. That's what made him righteous. And I don't believe that was by any stretch of the imaginations a high bar. He had a relationship with God. He was chosen. That could set us off on a whole different tangent of predestination and all of that. We won't go into that. But he was chosen. He was righteous. And so, why then did God spend over a year flooding and eliminating, executing everything else? Only to be told that he realized that all the imaginations of man from his youth is evil. Now, what that tells us is that the flooding was not a long-term solution. God had to destroy the creation as it was in order to preserve and protect the possibility for future redemption. It's like amputating a part of your body, a limb, to save the rest. It was an emergency surgery and intervention that God had to take. Otherwise, humanity as a whole would have self-destructed. And so God stepped in as an emergency preventative action to preserve a remnant, a small group of people, to ensure that his plan of redemption could be fulfilled through that family of Noah. So God destroyed as an emergency action to prevent humanity from destroying themselves. And so he kept a small group of you. But it is important to know that the ultimate redemption from sin was going to come through Jesus Christ. And that's how this story of Noah points us towards Jesus Christ. It does. Because the water floods could not destroy sin, which was the real problem. It couldn't destroy corruption. Corruption still remained. And we see here clearly that God acknowledged and said, hey, I'm not going to do it again. I'm not going to flood the earth and destroy again. I want to pause after chapter 8 so that next episode, which is episode 12, we can go into chapter 9. But I hope that you have gotten something from this very few, just over 25 minutes we've spent. And I really hope that it helps you acknowledge God's sovereignty and accept His actions, His ways, the things that He allows in your life. And you just see it as all working together for good, for your good, and for His glory. All right? Okay, so see you next time.